Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Nicholson, and I am the Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Park. Thank you for being here and participating in this tribute to a very, very special horse, a very special friend, the great John Henry.
Thank you all for coming out today. I'm here to represent the family, the former owners of John Henry. The only other story I'd like to share with you is pretty typical of my stepdad, Sam Rubin, who had a tremendous sense of humor, unlike John Henry. But shortly after, right after the winning of the Arlington Million, we were walking with the moderator, Mr. McKay, down to an interview, and he turned to my stepdad and he said, "Well, Sam, you just won the biggest purse in history of horse racing. How do you feel?" And he said, "Well, I think I've just broken even at the track."
This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. I've been to quite a few memorial services in my life, and I don't know, well, I do know that I've never been to something so extraordinary. We're talking about a horse. We're talking about a horse that was able to capture the minds and hearts of people all over the world, not just in the United States. Because when he went to Tokyo to represent the United States in the Japan Cup, he had a lot of people over there rooting for him because of his tremendous popularity. I can't tell you how blessed I feel that I was a very small part of his career. I was fortunate enough to have ridden him in his last 14 starts, and just had an absolute blast. I'll never forget the first time I threw a leg over his back at Hollywood Park. Ron needed a good work into John because it was his first start as an 8-year-old. He was getting ready for his first start as an 8-year-old. I was lucky enough to get the mount when Bill Shoemaker was caught with a bit of a dilemma. He had the option to ride either John or a horse called The Wonder, who was a wonderful horse in France that was trained by Shoe's longtime partner, Charlie Whittingham. And Shoe said, okay, 4-year-old, star from France, trained by Hall of Fame Charlie Whittingham, or an 8-year-old coming back off of a hip injury, will probably never ever be able to resume that wonderful momentum that he had as a 5, 6, and 7-year-old. So Ron wanted to get a really good work into him to make sure he was fit for his race the following week, and so he worked him about an hour or so before the first race at Hollywood Park. There were people in the stands, and that naturally gets a horse's adrenaline up. And so John proceeded to go out there and work a mile in like 1:35 and 1, which is race time. Well, he ran in the American Handicap a week later, which was a mile and an eighth, but John's mile time for the race was 1:36 flat. He worked 4/5 of a second faster than he raced. And I could see the look on Shoe's face when I walked back into the jocks room. He said, uh-oh, I think I'm in trouble. And one last funny story I'll share with you. Charlie Whittingham tried time and time again for years to beat John Henry. And the media would always ask him, Charlie, do you ever think you're going to figure out a way to beat John? He said, beat him? He said, I'm trying to outlive him. And God bless John. He beat Charlie in that race also. And I want to thank John Nicholson, Kathy Hopkins, Kathy Roby, and all the other wonderful volunteers at the horse park for taking, and all of the veterinarians at Haggard's also for taking such incredible care of John.
As many of you know, John Henry was named for a legendary folk hero that seemed to have an iconic figure of his own as the person that beat the steam drill by his great athletic prowess. And John inherited some of those characteristics of a highly competitive spirit of competition and a combative will to win. Early in John's years, he was rejected. He was spurned later. He was denigrated by the pedigree experts. But he gained the admiration and the respect of the racing public when, in 13 of his 36 wins, he won by 13 times by his nose and a nod of the head. That dramatic sort of finish of John is what's endeared him to the American racing public. But you can't talk about John without also thinking of his long relationship with Ron McAnally, who built an incredible bond of trust and faith and understanding with the horse. Now, when it came time for John to retire after a retirement ceremony at Hollywood Park, which over 46,000 people attended in 1985, there was an extreme competition between the East and the West to find a retirement home for John. The California tracks and the California breeders are interested. Mr. Rubin had a great deal of friends and connections in the East. And we owe a debt of gratitude, those of us who are Kentuckians, to one of our native sons, Ron McAnally, who refused to see that John would go anywhere but to Kentucky and to the horse park, which he has been such a wonderful institution. So we have a final salute today to this grand old champion who outlived those critics who suspected his pedigree not to measure up to a great champion, but he became the people's horse, the people's champion. And may we always remember the wonderful, illustrious record that he had on the track and his combative way of doing it his way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. He did, in fact, do it his way. There's no question. Our next speaker, and so he stands now like a rock in our memory, and he will forever. The story of his life belongs to the ages. And so now I will, standing here at his home, the Hall of Champions, I will say, as we have said 10,000 times over the years, and for the final time, ladies and gentlemen, we give you the great John Henry.